Thank you. I appreciate the fact that they've allowed me to come here as a business guy. I'm about as far from a technologist as you guys will ever see, okay? But we're going to talk about technology joint ventures. And I'm happy that Serjan and Conrad and Gordova and Alex, I guess you're the organizing group for this program, right? So it's a very mixed organizing group, right? You guys are Serbian, lived in Ireland, Polish, living in Netherlands. I don't know what Alex is, German, UK, what do we call him?
He doesn't call himself.
He doesn't call himself, okay. And Gordana is Croatian, but maybe Serbian a little bit too. And so my grandmother is Romanian, my grandfather's German, my wife's grandmother is from Kiev, and her grandfather is from Wales, so it's like you guys, a mixture, okay? So I'm a business guy. I was teaching this morning with the business people that were all with me. Unfortunately, they have to listen to me again. And we're going to be talking about technology joint ventures. But before I start with this lesson, I was trying to bring together what I saw happening in here this morning a little bit with what I was doing in the other room. In the other room, we were talking about angel investors. Do you guys know about angel investors? Okay. I'm an angel investor in Pennsylvania. And so we spent the morning talking about, as you know, there are people that give you money from your family, and then there are angel investors. This is our own money. And then you have venture capitalists who give you money, but that's somebody else's money. They're not investing their money. In my angel group, we have about 15 guys and ladies, and we invest our own money. So we were talking about why people invest in startup companies and what they're looking for this morning. And I had the pleasure of sitting in the beginning session when Stephen was talking to you about networks, and then I went out. So he was talking to you about wireless networks, right? Connection networks in the beginning. And something clicked in my brain. I thought, well, maybe I could bring what I was doing in the room together with the business people together, which at least the beginning of the conversation, I only saw, is Stephen here? I don't see he's not here. So he can't even correct me, right? But you guys were all here. So the business people weren't in the room, but the technologists were. And he was talking about connections in the transportation business. Remember, he had that slide up about where the river came in. He was talking about trucking. And that light bulb went off because the first investment that I did with my angel group was with a company called Orion in Pennsylvania. And they have a special purpose wireless GPS system that they put in trucks, okay? They don't own the factory that makes the GPS system. They contract because they're obviously not big enough. It's a small startup company, now only going 4 or 5 years. They can't own the factory, so they've done a contract with a special purpose factory. But what I thought might be interesting, and I didn't finish the end of the conversation, you guys are in here, but at least the first part of the conversation with the technologists, I'm going to try to bring together with the venture capitalists. This system that they have in their trucks, they also developed the software system which collects the data, and actually that's their expertise. They started off in our university as computer science and software guys, and they really developed a very special purpose software. And I don't know all that they collect, but I know that they collect the truck routings, so how the trucks are routed, and the most efficient delivery that these trucks are making. And they're in all kinds of industries, okay? From package delivery to grocery deliveries. The devices are also tracking the speed and the safety, if there's any accidents with these trucks, the fuel consumption, obviously the best fuel consumption. Obviously, one of the main things they're looking at is the stops, how they make the stops, and how long these truckers take at each stop. The system also combines with the maintenance log, any repairs that are done in the trucks, how many out of service dates that the trucks make, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff, okay? But there aren't a lot of young companies that actually track all this stuff on a GPS device and actually put it in a format that the company can actually use the data. That's really their expertise. And so they told their story to our investment group, and I was part of the first 10 guys. We invested $150,000, so each of us had to come up with $15,000. Based on their sales and how they were going, another group of guys in our group, because our group got bigger, they put in another $100,000. So we've got $250,000 in this company. So it's a little bit of what you guys, I think, were talking about this morning, the technology, okay? And what I was talking about in the other room is why we invest in these kind of companies. And we invested because we thought that this software was one of the most creative softwares that we saw. And there weren't many guys in the market. There were a couple big guys, but there was nobody doing all of this. Now the interesting part that I wanted to tell you about is that we thought the market was the trucking industry. That's what they thought the market was, right? So when they go out into the trucking industry, they're dealing against big trucking companies, and some of these trucking companies have thousands of trucks on the road. At the time we invested in them, they had about 3,000 trucks on the road, maybe 20 contracts. And they've doubled that amount of trucks, okay? But it's a small company. It's only, you know, when we invested on them, they were 5 people. I think they're now about 7 or 8 people in the company. And they'll add a few more people, but they're salespeople. The interesting thing was that while we thought the business was to sell to the trucking companies, what has happened in the last year is that they're not selling to the trucking companies per se. They're selling to insurance companies. Why insurance companies? Why would the insurance companies be a bigger market than the trucking company? I mean, obviously the insurance guys can't use these devices, right? They have to demand that the trucking companies that insure with them use these devices. Why would they do that? Why would the insurance companies be a better market than the trucking company? To get this stuff in the field, right? Why do you think?
Because they benefit from knowing this stuff and being able to data mine it, more or less.
Data mine it, and the insurance companies can get the kind of information they want to know in order to decide what kind of a policy they give that trucking company, right? So if the insurance companies have got this kind of data, they can actually then decide which of these trucking companies are a better risk, and therefore give them a better deal in the insurance company. So if you're the trucking company and you want to get a better rate on your insurance, then you put these devices in your trucks, and you gather all this information, and you get a better rate from the insurance company, okay? So now they're making more market share advances by going and selling, or at least the idea, with the head insurance companies, and the insurance companies then, who obviously have a bigger relationship with the trucking companies than they do, at least the ones that they're not selling to, then the trucking companies are buying their device. And it all works together. So, I don't know, it may just put together a little bit of what you guys and ladies were talking about in technology and what I was talking about in the other room about investment in startup companies. Okay? You see that part of it? Okay, so the whole thing is, the idea is to bring business together with technology. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a businessman, and I for 25 years I ran sales forces for a big company you might know called AT&T. I was on the equipment side, and I started off in Dublin, Ireland when we split the company. And I went from Ireland to Italy, to Rome, Italy. I was based in Rome. Did a reorganization of the sales force in Rome, Italy. Then I ended up, as I said this morning, in Italy. Nothing happens in August. All the Italians go home. Or they go away. They go to Sorrento or Positano. I don't know where Michele is. He can tell you all about that. At least they're not at work. I'll tell you that for sure. Okay? That was my big shock about living in Italy. Behind my house was the biggest tennis campo in the whole city of Rome. It was called the Oasis de Pace. It had 30 clay tennis courts, and all the Italians play tennis because there's no golf courses. And I thought, well, the Italians are, you know, here comes Ferragosto, so everybody shuts down for August. I thought everybody would go, you know, to the tennis courts, but then I have to ask myself a question. In Ferragosto, is the tennis courts, are they open or are they closed? Of course, the Europeans are all laughing because they know they're closed, right? It doesn't matter that all the thousands of Italians want to come out and play tennis. Tradition says you close the tennis courts. So they were closed for 4 weeks. So I had nothing that I could do, so I flew off to Australia, and I sold a big contract in Australia, and so I moved to Melbourne, Australia. Spent a couple of years in Melbourne. Then I moved to New Zealand, met my wife there, but I spent a year living in New Zealand, working there. Then I came back to Italy, lived in Rome, had an office in Greece, in Athens, Greece. Very tough business in Greece, not any tougher than it is right now. And then I went to Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong we opened up 14 countries in 5 years. So I managed it for a year outside of Hong Kong, then I moved to Asia and opened up all our major offices in India, Japan, and China. And then came back and went to the Netherlands, and I spent 2 years in the Netherlands, but I was mostly working in the Middle East and Africa and some places in Eastern Europe like Russia and Poland, okay? So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about is what happened during all of that and doing technology ventures, all right? So I'm going to talk to you about technology joint ventures. But let me start and tell you where they fit in. So if I could put my whole 25 years in business onto one slide, this is what it would be, okay? This was my strategy for most of those years in business of how I went overseas. If we were not in a country, we opened up a representative office. Somebody tell me, what does a representative office look like? Is it big or is it small? How many people? What is it? What is a representative office? If it's the first time you're in a country, what do you think it looks like? Huh? A bedroom? Yeah, it's not very big, is it? How big is it?
Square meters?
Yeah, well, it doesn't know square meters. How many offices do you have? One, maybe, right? Maybe a conference room, an office. How many people?
One.
Well, maybe one.
Maybe
Yeah.
two.
Maybe two. Maybe a secretary yourself. What do you do all day in a representative office, do you think? What are you doing? Huh?
Looking for clients.
Looking for clients on the telephone? Or maybe not on the telephone, huh?
Not anymore.
Not so much on the telephone. We're outside the telephone, right?
Attending events where your potential customers
Right. Attending events where your potential customers are. You're probably spending time, in my case, with the U.S. Embassy for all the 13, 14 countries that are here. You guys and ladies have country representatives in those countries in your embassies that are there to help you. So you spend time with them. You're out at events. A lot of times you're eating, right? You're going to dinners, meetings, a wonderful job, right? You're going to events. What are you trying to find out there? What are you trying to look for? You said potential clients.
and multipliers. How can you?
Okay, how can we multiply those clients, right? What else are we looking for?
Partners.
Huh? Partners, possible partners, right? Also, are you meeting some of the competitors? You will. Okay, depends how that goes, okay? In some countries, you actually meet them in a very formal way, okay? Which I'm going to talk to you about. Okay, guys, there's some seats here somewhere, huh? We're sold out. You have to pay extra $10, Milan, for a seat, okay? No? Okay. All right. So after we set up a representative office, sometimes I sold consulting. Have any of you been a consultant? Some of you are, a lot of technologists here. Have any of you worked on a consulting team for a company? Yeah? Nobody? Nobody's a consultant, huh? What does a consultant do? What do they do? What do they sell?
Knowledge.
Sell answers.
Huh?
Sell answers and solutions.
Okay, they try to sell a solution. But how do they do that? What are they selling? Knowledge? Yeah, knowledge. You're selling yourself, right? It's a great job. You don't have factories. You don't have supply chains. You're selling your mind, selling yourself, right? It's a good job, okay? The trouble is that after you sell it a few times, then you have to go out and sell it some more. It may not work as well the second time. But anyway, we sold consulting because a lot of our equipment didn't work in the countries. Then we would set up a sales force, so I'd make the decision of whether or not I hire people like yourselves. I would hire some technology people, some sales people, and we would put teams together around the world. My mistake was that in the beginning, I mostly hired salespeople and marketing people. But everything I sold was technology. So after it got sold, who had to come in? You guys, the engineers. So after a while, we started hiring teams together of sales and of technologists. And then down here, we have the subject, the only subject we're going to talk about today, which is joint ventures. Okay? And that's where you either joint venture with somebody, or in some cases we actually bought somebody in order to create a joint venture, but I'll talk about that. Eventually we had full operations and we got big enough to look like a company, so we now would have marketing people, we might have our own lawyer, might have our own accounting person, and then at the end of the story we had regional vice presidents. And we would break up the world based on regional vice presidents. Give me a region of the world. What would be, if you were breaking up a company, if you had the ability to do that, right, and you were looking at the world, how would you break up the world?
Per continent?
Yeah, well, it could be by continent. Give me the name of a region. How would you do it? Huh?
Balkans.
Okay, the Balkans, but it's too big, it's too small, right, to be part of a region.
East
Okay?
Europe.
Okay, so, yeah, so most companies would have made it East Europe, right? And that would be, they would feel that there would be a coincidence of interest, and that might be a region which you guys would fall into. What would be another region? If you have East Europe, you must have?
West Europe.
Yeah, West Europe. So in the old days, that's what we had, right? But today, if they're doing it, what would they wouldn't call it East Europe and West Europe, what would they call it? Just stay with Europe. What is the big designation of Europe today?
Europe.
The EU. Yeah. So most companies would then break it up under EU and non-EU. What do you got in the EU right now? 28? 28 countries? I don't know, right? You guys should know, right? I'm an American, but I think it's 28 with Romania, right? Yeah, Croatia too, right? When did Croatia join? Okay, 29. 28, this is 28. This is 28, okay, 28. Let me ask you a question. Should it be 28?
No, it should be more.
Should be more. Okay? Okay, that's the Austrian here telling me it should be more, right? What do you think? Should it be more? I should ask the Germans. Should it be more? Some people would say it should be less, right? How many countries founded the EU? 6. 6, right?
Yes.
When it started?
Yes.
It was like, what, Italy, France, Germany, Spain, Luxembourg, Belgium, Netherlands?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, and Belgium. It's Belgium, what? Okay, so they started the EU, all right. Okay, so today companies might do Europe, East Europe, West Europe, EU, non-EU, because you have to have a manageable piece. What would be the other region, though, of the world? How would you break up the rest of the world now? Huh? Okay, Asia. Okay. And Asia is very wide, right? But, you know, it goes all the way down to India and Australia, then all the way up to the tigers, picks up all of China. That would be Asia. Yeah, that's... Huh? Okay, so North America, right? What would be, if you're breaking up a company, what would be inside North America? What would you throw there? The United States and what else? Canada and Mexico.
No.
Yeah, he says no, but Mexico is part of most companies' North American region because of the free trade agreement. Okay, but only Mexico, right? So you break up those three, so then what becomes the other region? The rest of it, Latin, Central America, South America, right? We call it CALA. Okay? So we got East, Western Europe, Asia, North America, we got CALA, all the Latin-speaking countries. Unfortunately, though, there's one country in that region that doesn't speak Spanish, right? Who is it?
Brazil.
Brazil. They speak Portuguese, right? And unfortunately, Brazil's 50% of the GDP of all the countries in this region. And that they don't speak Spanish. So it's kind of an interesting region. You know. And so you got one left now. You got an area left that we haven't called. What's the other area that's left, huh?
Australia.
Oh, and Australia is part of Asia. Yeah, well, it's interesting about Australia, yeah, Middle East. Middle East. It's interesting about Australia because when I moved to Australia, where did all the products in Australia go? What market did everything in Australia normally get sent to? This is 25 years ago. Where would it go? Who was Australia? Who owned Australia originally?
UK.
UK, so it's a Commonwealth, right?
British Queen.
Huh?
British Queen.
Yeah. Well, the Australians, well, okay. I think I told a joke to some people once. You know, the Australians, they were created by who? I mean, the country was created by people from the UK, but what kind of people?
Thieves.
Thieves, crooks, and, yeah, thieves, crooks, and people going to jail, right?
There is people from Australia here.
I know. Who's from Australia? Is he?
No.
Now, who's the Aussie here? Is there an Australian somewhere?
Where's my name?
They're not even telling me who they are, right? Okay. Well, there's a joke that when the UK guy goes to Australia, he shows up at the immigration desk and the immigration officer says to him, hey, listen, are you a crook? Are you a thief? Or have you ever killed anybody before you come in here? And the UK guy says, I didn't know that was still a requirement for me to be able to get in here. So, the Australian guy will argue. But anyway, all their products used to go to the Commonwealth nations. Where do they go today? Asia. Right. They're the meat breadbasket for Korea. All their minerals are going to China or other places. So they have become absolutely dependent totally on the Asian market. So we mentioned the Middle East, right? That's usually the last market. But there's also one with the Middle East, and we didn't mention it. It's only 1 billion people. What is it?
India.
Africa. Africa. And usually those are put together in a company. Usually they put Middle East and Africa. Two of the most difficult markets to do business in. Okay? So it's usually the last. You may remember on my chart of my career, those are the last 2 to 3 years of my career. They put me in Africa and the Middle East. So I think they're trying to kill me off or force me to retire. So anyway, I decided after those 2 markets I would leave the company and go to education, right? So that's the way you would break up the world. And so on my slide here, eventually that's where we got to. Eventually, we got to the point where we broke up the world into regional pieces. I ended up as the Vice President of Asia. And I should mention that because it is a worthwhile story. Because all of you in your career eventually are going to find someday, maybe when you get to a job, that you really can't handle the way it was given to you. Originally, when I was promoted, I was the Vice President of all of the world for AT&T. They only had one Vice President's job. And, you know, it was a really cool job. I thought I could put in my car, you know, King of the World. You know, I thought, my wife was really happy. It sounded like a really big job. The truth of the matter was I couldn't do it. It was way too big. We needed to get into too many markets too quickly, and you couldn't control the whole world. There was no way that I could manage it. I would have done a very terrible job. So I went to the president of AT&T and I said, I can't do it. Let's break the world up like this, which we did. And then he asked me, where do you want to go? Since you broke it up, you get to go. And of course, I picked Asia. Why did I pick Asia? Huh? Yeah, more promising money, more promising markets. I told the other group I made more money in 5 years in Asia than the other 20 years of my career. Okay? Because the markets were going through the roof, which is actually what's happening right now. So it's happening again, and it continues to happen. Okay, so this lesson, which we're going to get to, I promise, is on joint ventures. So these are the steps that I went through in my career. From the way we opened up countries. How long, if you come into a country, so I came into Italy, or I came into Thailand, or I came into Japan, or I came into India for the first time. I was the first one in China for our company. And we start down this list of trying to make these changes. How long do you think this takes? A year? 2? 5? 10? How many years do you think it takes to go from the top of the chart to the bottom of the chart? I should look over in this group here. I can't see them with the polls. So how many years would it take you to do that? To go from the first time you're in there to the time maybe you create a joint venture?
3.
Huh?
3 to 5.
3?
I said 3 to 5.
3 to 5? Anybody more? Less? Of course, it always varies. I've never done it in less than 2 to 3 years. Most of the time, this will take you probably 8 to 10 years to go through all these steps. Okay, so this is a long-term play, a big money play. For the big companies that are doing this, you have to have a long-term strategy. The only thing that changes from 10 years to 2 years is this right here. Right? And that's why we're going to talk about it, right? Because doing a joint venture, purchasing a partner, setting up a factory, all of that changes the whole model for a country, okay? And that's why we're going to talk about technology joint ventures. Okay. So, what's a joint venture? So I put up some key words up there about what a joint venture is, all right? Maybe you guys tell me. You can look at those words. What do you think a joint venture is? You can use my chart if you can explain it. Huh? Okay, so first off, it's a partnership, right? So, and there's a few things on here. When you go in to negotiate this, you go in to negotiate this with a group of partners or a single partner. Often the government's involved in this because if you're going to invest big money in a country, the government wants to know what technology you're bringing in. They want to know how much money you're going to invest. So often you'll find yourself talking to government guys here also, right? So the first is the partners, right? That's one of the top 3 items you have to search out, right? So you got to find a partner. What else? What is a joint venture? What are you going to do in a joint venture? I have to go over to this side of the room. You're not allowed to answer though. He's one of the coordinators. What about the rest of you guys? So you've got a partner. What else? What else is a joint venture? What's the purpose of it?
You have to have a goal.
This side of the room is, what is it?
You have to have a goal.
You have to have a goal? A goal, right, for the joint venture, right? Okay. Huh? What do you think one of the goals of the venture is?
Common interest.
Huh?
Common interest.
Okay, so you have to have common interests. Hopefully you guys are in the common business. I have another chart where we're going to talk about why you do it, but let me just ask you, why do you do it? Go right to the bottom. Forget about that chart right now. Why would you do a joint venture? What's the number one reason that you're trying to do?
You must have some local people to know the market and to know the people.
Right. So you're going after a group of people that know the market because you're trying to capture the maximum amount of market share early on. Remember this thing? I said the only thing that takes you from 10 years to 2 years is if you do a joint venture, right? If you capture a group of people that know the market and can therefore display that for you, and it jumps you ahead of everybody else, okay? So, you have to have partners. The partners want to keep their own identity, okay? Is the joint venture named after you or named after them, or is it generally something that's combined or something different? What do you think? Combined, right? Yeah. Normally, you don't want to hide behind somebody. They don't want to take on your name. You don't want to take on their name. Generally, it's a joint venture together, right? My first joint venture in China was with the Shanghai government. So it's called, as it is today, AT&T of Shanghai. AT&T of Shanghai, okay? You have to figure out who owns what part of the venture, okay? So, is this the best kind of a joint venture? 50, 50. Where your partner owns 50% and you own 50%. I got at least a couple of people here that don't think this is a good idea, right? So why? Huh? They're locked. Nobody's in control, right? Up until 2001, if you went into China to do a joint venture, and you wanted, let's say you wanted 60% and you gave the Chinese 40%. I don't know if anybody's been working in China. I think there's a few people here that have. Can you do that in China? Could you do that in China? No. No. It was not allowed. Because as a foreign partner, up until the time they came in the World Trade Center, which I think is 2001, this was not allowed. You always had to be the minority partner. You could be 49, so 51, that would be okay, but the Chinese always had to be in control. By the way, now they can't do that. They have to negotiate it with you, and you've got the chance to control the joint venture. You have to assign jobs to people, okay? You have to assign what jobs people are going to have, okay? In a joint venture, let's say someone's going to be the chairman of the venture on the board. Someone's going to be the director who runs it. Someone's going to be the VP of sales. Someone's going to be the VP of operations, going to run the factory. And someone's going to be the CFO, the financial. So I'll go over to this other side here. What job do you want? You can have any one of those 5 jobs. You're going to negotiate those jobs in the joint venture. Which one do you want? Which one should you have? You want to be the director?
Chairman.
You want to be the chairman?
Financial director.
Huh?
Financial director.
He wants to be the financial guy, okay? Okay, so you immediately see what happens here. This is how the negotiations start to go. If I'm coming into your country, and I'm the American, I'm coming into Serbia, right? Should I be the chairman of that joint venture?
No.
No. Why not? Because I'm an American, right? No, come on.
Is that good PR?
Huh?
Is that good PR?
It's not good PR, no. It's probably not good operationally either, right? Because the local home country, the chairman is the highest level job, but it's not the operational job. He's not running the venture. He's on the board of directors, right? He's the one that has the political contacts. He's probably older. Should be, now I'm older, but I shouldn't be the chairman, right? So the chairman should go off to the country, whoever your partner is. So if he takes that job, Igor back here said he wants the financial job. How many of you think the financial job's a good job to have? Yeah, I want that financial job, right? So I'm going to take the CFO job as the American because I want to control the books, right? If I control the books, I know what's happening with the money. So if the chairman's job is gone and the CFO job is gone, again back to this side of the room, you guys tell me what's the next job you want? You're the foreign partner, okay? You're the foreign partner. Which job do you want there?
I guess there's a job that I would give away is a sales VP for sales.
Sales,
We need someone
okay.
from the country.
So Sebastian says that the foreign partner should have this job, the sales vice president. The local partner, yeah, the local partner, right. Now, my mistake is I'm a sales guy. So I always wanted the sales job, right? Should I have the sales job? No, absolutely not, right? Sebastian is correct. That sales vice president ought to go to the local partner because they know how to sell in their country. So if I give them the sales job, now I got 2 other jobs left. I've got the director of the venture, and I've also got the vice president, the guy who's the VP of operations. Call him the plant manager. He's the one that actually runs the facility that you're building, okay? You got 2 jobs left. Which one do you want? Do you want the director of the venture, or do you want the head of the plant? Yes. And I would willingly give you the director of the joint venture because the job that I want is the vice president of operations. What? Why do I want the vice president of operations? The one that's running the factory.
Because I can place people that I know and working.
I can put the right people in the job. Whose technology is it always, generally? Whose technology is it? Foreign, generally. Okay, so it's my technology, right? So if it's my technology, let me give you this example. If I put a plant, I'm putting a switching plant in Taiwan. We'll talk about it in a second. My switching plant, my biggest switching plant in the United States is in Oklahoma City. So if you go to Oklahoma City and you look at the plant that makes big digital switching machines, you look at that plant and I put a blindfold on you and I put you on an airplane and I take you to the island of Taiwan in China, where we've just built the factory, and I take off your blindfold and you open your eyes, what do you see? Exactly the same thing. Maybe smaller, but exactly the same thing. The same machines, the same circuit board machines, the same testing machines, the same loading machines. By the way, a lot of this equipment is German and European, but it looks exactly, right? So if I build that factory exactly like the one in Oklahoma, what's the only difference? In Taiwan. Huh? The workers, the people, right? So how I train them and how they work. If I do it exactly like we did in Oklahoma, and they're great people, it should work pretty much the same way, assuming the management is the same. There's a lot of assumptions, okay? But I want to build that, so the guy who I want in charge, or the lady, is the operations director, who's the one that knows that plant the best, okay? And that's why I want them to have the job. Okay, so those are all, and by the way, you sit at the table and you negotiate these things. I mean, you may be months talking about the ownership. You certainly will be months at the table with the foreign partner arguing about who's going to get these jobs, right? Because everybody has their preference about what job they want. They just don't give them to you. You have to negotiate this, okay? And then you get to the point where you can actually do the venture. Now, so these are some of my reasons why we do a joint venture, right? You guys mentioned in the beginning, the market. Above all, it's market, right? What about the labor? Why do I go to all these countries? Why did I go to China? Why am I in India? Why did I go to Thailand? Why did I go to those places? Why were we in Poland? Huh? I'm sorry, I can't hear it over. Less?
Production price.
Yes, production costs. Less production costs, right? And why do I have less production costs? Because what's always cheaper? Usually the labor, right? Why is China going through a problem right now? What's happened to the labor price in China just in the last year? Huh? It's gone up significantly. You know how much? I saw an article in Fortune 2 weeks ago, 34% in 1 year. I don't think any of you got a 34% raise, right? 34% raise in overall manufacturing costs and basic manufacturing operations. That's why China's worried about Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, because all of those countries are down here in their manufacturing costs. And if they don't raise them, people are going to start to pull the plug on China. I don't know if it will happen, but a little less than a year ago I had dinner with the president of Nike China. It's a guy by the name of Simon Pestridge, a young guy. He's only 40 years old. I knew him when he was the head of marketing at their headquarters plant. And he and I used to teach together years ago in a program that we developed. So I had dinner with him when I went to Shanghai. And he told me that if things keep going the way they are, that he was working on a plan to take every factory that Nike has in China out of the country. And that's their biggest single producer in the world. But if they keep going the way they're going, he's thinking of moving all those plants out of there to places like the Philippines, Indonesia, even places like Burma, which Cambodia, and probably Indonesia, because it's the 5th largest country in the world. So those are the reasons that we do them, okay? access to financing. Sometimes when we put a factory in a country will offer to help us finance other ventures in other countries. When I first went to Taiwan, they were offering to give me money to go somewhere else, as long as some of the equipment that we sourced came out of Taiwan. Sometimes those countries have more money than you do, and so access to financing is okay. Regulatory requirements, some countries, they just tell you from the beginning, once you get in there, you can try to start your own business, but unless they see you as a partner, unless they see you investing in money, unless they see you bringing technology in, they're not interested in you being successful. One of those that I'll talk to you about in a few minutes here is Korea. Korea plays hardball with that, mainly because of the position they have today in the world. So, we have to consider all these things, but even after you consider all these things, it's still the best thing for us to do. And that's why it's that part of the strategy. So, okay. So what I thought I would do for the time that we have left, whatever that is I would take you through, because this is a multicultural group, I'm taking you and spin you around the world and talk to you about 12 joint ventures, okay? Now, I'm not a technologist, but I thought maybe before I begin this conversation, these are all technology joint ventures, okay? So they're all factories to a point. Some of them are software operations. So the technology that we're building there, we're building digital switching, big digital switching machines, central offices, or we're doing microwave transmission systems, cellular systems. We're doing wireless base stations. You may know that all wireless systems are controlled by the base stations that are below those big microwave towers that you guys see all across your countries. Some of these places are fiber optics, so we're building fiber optic, where we also not only put those fiber optics into systems, we also make fiber optics. We used to be the second largest manufacturer of fiber optics, but in the wisdom of the guys in my old company, they sold all of it to Corning. And now Corning is #1 in the world, right? Stupid, stupid decision, but at that time the company wanted cash. Corning made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and they sold all the fiber optics to Corning. Another thing is called PDS, Premises Distribution Systems. These are like smart building systems, okay? The connectors that go into smart buildings. And last but not least, software operation systems, operational control systems for big software used in telecom markets. So we've done all of these. Now, the first two I put up there because if I was doing this talk in America, they would not be very happy with me, right? Because the joint ventures that we did in Thailand and Poland of all places, were in cartels, okay? So let me ask you the question, is a cartel legal? I'll go over to this side of the room. I know they know the answer over here. Is a cartel legal? Okay, so Nazarene said a cartel is legal. She's going to jail with me, okay? Well, okay. Is it legal in the United States? A cartel. Do we have a cartel? Of course, yeah, he said of course, right? But are they legal? Huh?
They're in the gray zone.
Yeah, not really. Oh, they're in the gray zone. Ah, okay. So she says they're in the gray zone. In the United States, it isn't really a gray zone. It's illegal, right? Because what does a cartel do? Somebody tell me what a cartel is.
Price fixing.
Huh? Okay, so my friend here, Florian went right to the heart of the problem because that's what you think about. He said it's price fixing. Is that what a cartel does? Maybe. It usually wants to go there, right? Why would that be allowed? Why would that be illegal? Price fixing. Can you do it in your countries?
No.
In your countries you're from, can you price fix? No.
Just the state.
Huh?
Just the state is allowed to do it.
It doesn't.
Just the state.
Oh, okay.
Just nation.
Okay.
Can have monopolies.
Yeah, can have monopolies, right? Okay, so these are really monopolies. but it's generally monopolies they allow other people into. What about countries like Korea? Does Korea have cartels? No, not North Korea. I'm not sure what North Korea is doing these days. What about South Korea? Yes. I mean, in effect, they do, right? You don't see any American cars there, probably no Japanese cars. If you go there, who controls the whole economy in Korea? They're guys that you know, right? They're called chaebols. In Korea, it's called a chaebol, C-H-A-B-A-L, a chaebol. It's a conglomerate. It's the same thing as a kurisu in Japan. Well, what do you think a chaebol is? You know what it is?
Groups of companies interconnected together, working together.
Right. Who's in it? So Sebastian said it's an interconnected. Who's in the connection in a chaebol? So first it's a business, okay? So the businesses are there, but who's connected to the business? Who do you need if you're trying to control a market? Who do you need in order to control it?
Distributors,
Huh?
suppliers, and complementary.
Complementary suppliers, but they're all in the business. Who else do you need to control the market? Huh? Banks, right. So that's one of the other partners, right? So you got banking, because they have to give you the money, or they don't give the money to other people. So you got business and banking, and of course, who's at the top of this pyramid? Government. Of course, the government, right? And the government colludes with banking and business to make the businesses successful. And it happens in a lot of countries. The funny thing about America is that we're the opposite of this, right? If you get too big in America and you get too big of a deal, what happens? That's what happened to my company in 1984. They broke it up, right? They're looking at Google. They're a little bit worried about Intel. They tried to break up IBM, right? So every time you get too big, my company was 1 million people. 1,100,000 people, all in the same company, and they broke us up because we were too big. Okay? So, in some countries, you have this collusion. In these two, when I went to Taiwan, the government said, okay, we've already allowed the Germans, Siemens, into the market, and we've already allowed the French, Alcatel, into the market. And we're going to allow you guys as the Americans, and that's it. So when I went to Taiwan, I thought this is a great deal. I like this deal. I only have to fight against 2 competitors. Seems like a good deal to me, right? To do that, we have to pick a partner, pick a technology partner, and we have to build a factory of a certain size. We had to invest so many tens of millions of dollars in those days. And Taiwan said you also have to have a software center. We weren't particularly interested in that, but they said you had to have a software center, right? Now the first problem is after I said yes, yes, yes to all of this, then Florian's point comes, right? Because they say you have to go to a meeting with your competitors. I don't normally go to meetings with my competitors, but I went to a certain restaurant, a back room in the restaurant, and I met the head of Alcatel and the head of Siemens and myself, right? And we sit down at a table. And what's the first thing the guy said to me? What Florian said, right?
What are you charging?
What are you charging? Let's all get together and fix the prices. And I can't do that. Okay, if I do that, I deserve to go to jail. And I have the direction from my company that I cannot fix prices. So the Germans and the French are not very happy with me. Okay? So we have to figure out some other way that we have to work together. Let me ask you the question, because the same thing happened to me in Poland. By the way, it was the same guys. It's crazy. It was the Germans and the French there too. They had a different reason. Why do you think the government wants a cartel? Why would anybody in the government think that a cartel is a good thing? Why would a cartel be a good thing for the country? Let me get somebody over here and then I'll come back. Somebody here. Why would a cartel be good for a country? You think? Could it be good for a country? Why? Let me know. Huh? It could generate more jobs. Because why? Why would it generate more jobs? Because the three businesses are what? They're working together, right? If they're working together, what's not going to happen amongst the businesses? Huh? They're all same. They all move pretty much at the same level, right? Huh? They move at the same rate. They're all not worried about losing their business, right? If you're not, go ahead.
So they are not cutting.
They're not cutting. They're not cutting people. They're not cutting each other's throat, right? And think about it from a technology standpoint. If
They
you're
will
in a,
invest.
huh?
They will invest.
They absolutely are willing to invest in that culture because all three know that they're going to succeed. And by the way, this kind of an argument, if I was having this in the U.S. Senate right now, they would put me in jail, right? But this is the thinking of a lot of countries, that if everybody succeeds together and moves up together, and we don't cut the jobs and everybody's successful, everybody's happy. And I think that's why they like a cartel. That was certainly the issue in Taiwan. And as I told you, they also offered me money to invest in other plants in other countries that they were interested in, as long as I brought some of the business back to Taiwan. It was a good deal. So then I went to Poland years later, and I kind of forgot about the cartel, and I run into the Germans again, Siemens, and the French again, Alcatel. But they were there. The Polish government was deciding that they would allow only 3 suppliers into the market. Northern Telecom was trying to get in. I believe Ericsson was trying to get in at that time in Poland. And they said, we're only going to let 3 of you into the market. We didn't know which 3 they were going to be, but the deal was, the difference in Taiwan was, in Poland you had to buy a Polish company. And so you had to find the company by yourself. So all 3 companies, the Germans, the French, the Americans, are all negotiating with 3 different companies to buy them. Northern Telecom, which is Canadian, Ericsson, which is Swedish, they were doing the same thing. And the first 3 that bought a Polish company and agreed to completely modernize that company were the first 3 in the market. Okay? Now, by the way, I bought a Polish company called Telfa. It was in a place called Bydgoszcz, Poland, and it was worth probably, on a good day, $20 million. On a really good day, had about 1,000 employees. We paid $60 million for it. $60 million. Okay. Because it didn't matter at that point, right? Because we figured we would get it back. Absolutely, because when you did the numbers, Stephen was saying you got to do the business plan. We broke up Poland, looked at what the whole market could be in Poland. It was in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year for infrastructure. So the $60 million price for the company didn't matter. Okay? But again, I can't talk prices with those guys. So if you can't talk prices with the other people, how could you break up the market? If you can't get into a conversation, which I couldn't, where we would collude on prices, how would you break up the market?
Territory.
Huh?
Territory, region.
By territory, by geography, right? Because that, not that this is Poland, but if it was Poland, right? And I was here in Warsaw, where the big machines were, and that was the AT&T area, right? I guess this could be Krakow down here, right? And if that was the German area, so in the south, they bid there. In Warsaw, I bid, and the French bid up here, right? And so we would all enter the bids, but we had to guess where the other guys were, and they would stay away from the bids here, and they would bid to lose. They would bid a bid that they knew would not work, so that I could win this here. And when I bid down here in Krakow, I bid for a bid that I knew would lose. But I had to guess at this, right? I don't know. Because we're not talking to each other about prices, okay? I officially say that. I don't want any of you guys to turn me in to the Security Exchange Commission. So this is an unholy alliance, okay? And we all bought companies, and we all bought factories. We built those factories bigger. Some places we brought in software. And then we stayed out of each other's way. And it works okay when the three of you can be friendly. But what happens when you're not friendly? What happens to the alliance?
The fourth one comes.
Huh?
The fourth one comes in.
Yeah, well, the fourth one comes in because the three of you are fighting like mad. And if you can't get into an agreement, then they bring somebody else in to sort you out, okay? But at least while I was there for those 3 years, that didn't happen. Okay, so those were ventures in cartels, okay? Now, I picked 2 other places, and these were joint ventures where the government, not to buy a company, the government invited us in. So the government pushed us, their government, not my government, pushed us to get into these countries. Take the one in Russia. What happened in 1991 over here in Russia and Eastern Europe? What happened? It started in 1990, 1991. What happened in history with the USSR? Collapsed, fell apart. You know, I don't know, who's that, Gorbachev and Reagan? Weren't they about the guys that kind of engineered that? Okay? So the USSR comes apart. What's created is the new independent states. So you got Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all of those, right? And Russia is actually quite friendly to America, right? But they know nothing about Western business principles. They really don't know anything. And we were over there trying to sell them equipment. And I would have sold them a lot of equipment. I would have even built a factory. But the Russians said, no. Not interested. What I want you to do is come over here and create an operational company so that we can study you guys and figure out how you work and what Western business is. And you're not going to sell anything here until you guys decide that you're going to operate a company here. So we created a company called Telmos. Do I have any Russians in the room? Anybody lived in Russia? My partner, you lived in Russia. So my partners were Rostelecom and MGTS, the Moscow government telephone system. So they're the big guys in town, right? They were the only guys in town. They were all run by Russian generals, okay? And the government said, you do business with them. I said, well, what about other partners? You did listen to me. You do business with them, okay? And these are the guys, and I said, okay, I'm not stupid. I'll do business with them, okay? And those were very interesting because we negotiated with them for 6 months. And every morning we started the meetings at 10 o'clock and they would put a full bottle of vodka in front of everybody's place at the table. Not one for the table, one for everybody. So we would start drinking. I don't drink, but we would start drinking in the morning. And by the evening time, the only people negotiating were the people that were still sitting in a chair somewhere. The rest were laying on the ground. A true story. So, but the Russians, they wanted me to create a company that they could figure out how we operate. So we actually created a company in Moscow. I could tell you a lot of stories about the Russians, okay? I'll tell you one. This is how the Russians decide on marketing, okay? This was a digital business services company, so we were going to be selling to businesses in the central area of Moscow. And eventually we trained the technologists. We were going to we built the switching machines, we built the offices. And they said, well, we're in charge of sales, so we'll hire the sales women. They were only women. And so they hired Russian ladies to be our sales women. You had to see them to believe it, okay? So they all looked like they came out of a beauty contest. And these were the sales women, right? They all looked like Tanya over there, tall, blonde hair, okay? I said, okay, I think they'll probably do okay. So we trained them how to sell, right? And then we opened the company, and nobody came. Now, we had this beautiful office and flowers and sales desk. Nobody went out yet, but nobody came. And I went to my Russian partner, who was a general by the name of Viktor Vasilyev, who eventually became the head of MGTS. And then but anyway, I said, Victor, nobody's coming. He said, don't worry. He said, they'll come. So that was another week. Nobody came. The second week, still nobody came. We've invested all this money, we've trained all these salespeople. Well, on about the middle of the second week, outside of our office on the street was a distribution cabinet for all the main circuits leading into the business district that surrounded our office. It was about the size of this distribution cabinet. So on Wednesday of that second week, a Russian truck pulled up to that cabinet. By the way, an MGTS truck. This is my partner's truck, right? Because he controls the environment there. He took the front of the cabinet off, and they took an axe, and they cut all the circuits to the business buildings that's all around us. And hundreds of people came out of the buildings because nothing worked in their offices. No telephone service, no data service. And who do you think's downstairs on the street? All those Russian sales girls that I told you about? They're in front of the building saying, come on down the street. Let me show you this new company that we set up. So we went from nothing to thousands of customers in 1 week, right? Because my customer cut the cables. Now, you think you can do that in Russia? Absolutely, right? They were my partner. So I said to Victor, you can't do this. He said, no, well, they were going to come anyway. He said, we were going to replace those cables. We just sped up the whole thing a little bit. We sped up the process, right? And I said, well, why? You know, and he said, well, we really want to make you successful here. And we all have good jobs. We were paying them Western salaries, so it was much better than the Russian salaries, and they wanted us to be successful. I don't know, is that illegal?
More or less.
More or less. But it was their customers, right? I tell you, I never explained that to the people back home. I was in Russia, they had no idea. All they knew is my sales results were going through the roof, right? I'm okay. Singapore. Okay, now here I am, and most of you are technologists. You would know that Singapore is probably one of the highest tech centers in Asia. Certainly one of the cities, I was there a couple of years ago, had a dinner with my alumni. I had 34 people at dinner. I think 4 of them were Singapore Chinese. There were Indians, there were Japanese, there were Russians there were Germans there. Everybody likes to work in Singapore. Romania was there, okay? Ukraine was there. Singapore is a wonderful place to work. The government wanted us to work on software. So this is a software joint venture. This is not a factory. This is a software joint venture and a software school. And it was created with the Singapore government, called the National Computer Board. It was created with Singapore Telecom and AT&T, 3 partners. We built a software school for operational software. Everything went well except one thing. We thought we were building a joint venture to sell software. And Singapore wanted us to build a joint venture where they learned how to do the software. People in the government didn't care if we ever sold it, ever. And we're business people, so we wanted to sell the software. They wanted to develop the best software for Asia, and they didn't care whether we sold it. They just wanted to have the best technology in their own network and the best people that understood it, but they didn't care whether we sold it. And eventually it destroyed the joint venture, because every time we asked, when are we going to start selling? When are we going to the market with all this software? They said, no. And they were 2 partners, I was 1, the government, Singapore Telecom. So in that case, I only had 30% of the venture, and we couldn't control it. And eventually, years after I left Asia, it destroyed the joint venture, okay? Because we didn't have the same objective in mind of what we were doing. Okay. All right, so now there's 5 more. These are simple market entry. Okay, so now I told you the government pulled us in, push-pull. Now we're pushing into these markets. These are all markets that we wanted to get in because we saw these markets going through the roof. China. I was in China when Tiananmen Square happened in June of 1989 when all the kids were killed. I had an office in the China World Hotel, so I had 25 people in Beijing. I happened to be in Shanghai at the time. And after the government, I mean, I don't know, how much you guys know about Tiananmen Square. You probably don't study that in history, but a bunch of kids got killed. The Chinese, by the way, do not usually talk about that as part of their history at all, right? If you get to know them very well, they'll admit it happened. And we still, to this day, don't know how many people got killed there, but it was thousands of people. I can tell you what did happen, though, because I was there, the Germans were there, the French were there, Ericsson was there, I was there, the big car companies were there, GM was there, Audi was there, VW was called then. We all left. Everybody left the country because we thought the whole country was going to go to war. After we got out, things settled down. I wanted to go back in, but the people in my company didn't want to go back in. They were pissed off at the Chinese for killing all those people, and they didn't think that we should go back in business with them. I had the view that it was terrible what happened, but if we didn't go back in and try to change the culture, it was going to happen again, because maybe you know the story. All the kids were asking for was democracy, right? They wanted democracy and capitalism to come to China, but it was too early. Is China capitalistic now? Absolutely. It's not democratic, right? Hong Kong is democratic, but not China. But capitalism has come to China. Unfortunately, it's having some issues because of that. But anyway, I went back in, and I had the opportunity to meet the president of China, Jiang Zemin, and he told me to go to Shanghai. I wanted to put my joint venture in Beijing, because Beijing was the capital. That's where my office was. I had this vision that we'd have a big red AT&T sign flashing when you guys come in at the airport, and you'd see AT&T in Beijing. But he told me, don't go to Beijing, I want you in Shanghai. Why Shanghai? What is Shanghai today in China? Contrast it with Hong Kong. What is Shanghai today in China? Is it important?
Yes, it's more important.
Nothing more important. It's now becoming the business capital of China, right? Not Hong Kong, which used to be the business capital, right? When I lived in Hong Kong for 5 years, it was the head, right? Well, why don't the Chinese like Hong Kong right now? Because Hong Kong for 50 years is what? Well, it was British for 100 years. They turned it over. But what is it in principle? It's democratic. It's free press, right? The rest of China is not democratic and free press, right? And we were talking last night about what's happening to Hong Kong, right? They're putting a box around Hong Kong because they're worried about it. They got 50 more years they got to live with these guys being free press and democratic. But I went to Shanghai, like the president said. By the way, he used to be the mayor of Shanghai. And by the way, all his friends are Shanghai people. So that's why he sent me to Shanghai. Okay? And we built a joint venture there. I had the first 25 people in Beijing. We had about 700 people in the venture. Today, AT&T has 3,400 people in China. But it all started in Beijing with 25 people. Okay? Korea, I told you, so I went over to Korea, right? And I told you that Korea is controlled by chaebols. So the Korean government wanted my technology, so they wanted me in there. But I really wanted there because I could see where Korea was going. I mean, how important is Korea? How many people live in Korea today? What's the size of Korea? How many million people? Take a guess. Huh?
It's pretty dense.
It's a very dense country. Forget about North Korea. Just South Korea. How many people live there, do you think?
18
Million. 60. About 60 million people. Okay? You're thinking of a small country, 60 million people. I saw some numbers that said today Korea is the 9th or 10th largest industrial power in the world, out of 200 countries, and getting bigger. Right? So if you think of Korea, who do you think of? How many people have iPhones in the room here? You don't have an iPhone, what do you have?
Samsung.
Right, you have a Samsung. Samsung is one of the chaebols, right? They're one of the 5 or so that control the whole market there. Samsung is Samsung, I understand Samsung is going to beat who? It's going to beat Apple, right? May even have, maybe you guys know the numbers. I heard that this year Samsung in smartphones will pass up the production of Apple. Okay? Samsung's one of the biggest in the world. Okay? What about Hyundai?
Second,
No, it's not second in the world, but it's number 4. This year is number 4. 10 years, it wasn't even on the list 10 years ago, right? You wouldn't even think about it. In America, you wouldn't have bought a Hyundai if someone paid you to buy a Hyundai, right? But what did they do? What kind of warranty does Hyundai give you? 7 years. In the United States, it's 10. The warranty in a Hyundai Accent that you can buy in America for slightly over $7,000 is 10 years for the major parts, engine, powertrain, and 5 years or 6 years, 60,000 miles, they'll fix everything. You can buy a car for $7,000 and they're going to fix everything for 5 years. And they're going to guarantee it for 10 years. What is that car? It's a throwaway car. It's like a razor blade, right? $6,000. You don't fix anything. They're taking the whole bottom level of the market away from Honda and from Toyota in the United States, right? They're number 4 in the world right now. A small Korean, you know what they made originally? They sold fish in the market and they made plastic bowls originally. If you go back to their history. 4th in the world. What about LG? Who's LG? My partner. What's LG? What does it stand for? Lucky Gold Star. That's the name of it, right? But most people don't say that. Hardly anybody says Lucky Gold Star. What do they say? What do their commercials say?
Life's good.
Life is good, right? That's their commercial. Life is good. They're now becoming the largest seller of TVs, videos. They're now becoming one of the 3rd largest in the world in appliances, right? Another Korean company. Another one is Daewoo. Also, Hyundai has shipping. Well, anyway, the government said you have to pick one of those partners, and we picked LG, and we built tens of factories together. We were rebuilding the infrastructure of Korea. We went from nothing to $500 million a year business. And then we ran into a problem, which I'm going to talk about in the ethics class, where they stole our technology. We eventually had to break the relationship with the Koreans. Okay? But originally, the government told us they were the ones we had to do business. Next is India. We have some people from India here. You know the Tata Corporation, right? How does the Tata Corporation look like in India?
it's like quite old business.
Very old company, very big, right? One of the what? Top 10, top 5?
Yeah, top 5.
Top 5 in the whole country. And they were our partner there. So we negotiated a joint venture in Gandhinagar with Ratan Tata, right? The only problem is we wanted to go to Bangalore. We actually had a piece of land in Bangalore. And they wanted us to go to Gandhinagar because there was nothing there in those days, right? And so even my partner, who was very strong, couldn't change the government from where they wanted us to go. So we ended up in Gandhinagar. When I first went there, there were wild camels running around the town. Camels that were wild. I said, you want me to build a factory here, but this is what we did. But the government said, you go there. It's a long story, but the government had, in those days, they could put duties on my equipment. When I came in, they could double the price of my duties like that. And if I didn't build a factory there, then they would not take those duties off my equipment. In Italy, Michele's from Italy. We went to Italy. We were not super successful. I did a small agreement with Pirelli, but in the end, they said you have to buy a company in Italy. And so we sorted out a company called Italtel. It was in the north, in a city called Ivrea, run by a lady. It was run by a woman. It was the first woman industrialist in Italy. Her name was Maria Belisario. And we did a joint venture and eventually bought that company. It was the only way we could get big in Italy. Indonesia. And nobody's from Indonesia here, right? Do you know the name Suharto?
Yeah.
Some people know his name. Who was Suharto?
President,
He was the president. How many years was he the president?
brother.
Forever, 30, 29, 30 years. He was the president. I guess you could call him a dictator. They wouldn't have called him a dictator, but he was 30 years the president, right? Indonesia wanted us to come in. We wanted to get there. It's the 5th largest country in the world, but they said, if you come into Indonesia, who do you have to do business with? Suharto. So guess who was on my board of directors? Tommy Suharto, his son, right? And as long as Tommy was in the business, everything was fine, right? So if you wanted to do business in those 30 years in Indonesia, a member of the family was part of your company. It was just the way it was done, okay? So those were all major markets that we pushed into, but we had to get along with all those different. Okay, so I wanted to end with just 3 that really weren't super high tech, but I wanted to show you the other ways in which you do business. Thailand. I went into Thailand, and our agent in Thailand was a really, really strong guy in Thailand, was the former police chief, and so on. But they did not want us in the big business. They wanted us in the small business of doing connectors and distribution boxes like that. And so we built a factory there. But what I didn't understand was the whole deal was related to the guy who was the biggest businessman in Thailand. It was a guy by the name of Kun Danan, D-A-H-A-N-A-N. He's the biggest distributor of chickens in Asia. And he's Chinese. But he's really Chinese with a Thailand passport. And what the government people wanted me to do was to create a factory where his son, who was studying at NYU, his name was Chris Danan, could be the general manager of our plant. So I went to New York and I met Chris Danan. He's an engineer, got his master's degree at NYU, and we built this factory and he became the president of the factory. And once that happened, everything changed. Before, they wouldn't allow any of my equipment into the network. When he became the president of my company, they allowed us to go through the tests. They approved all our equipment and our distribution systems, our connectors, our fiber optics, all of that stuff got into the Taiwan market. And it probably all started when we put this guy as the president. He was a pretty good guy, by the way. He married a Korean girl, which his father didn't like very much because he was Chinese. But anyway, so be it. Now in Japan, we went into Japan, and Japan is a very difficult market. I could spend a lot of time in Japan. But we didn't try to do big business there because you had companies like NEC and Fujitsu. All the big players were there, and they weren't going to let us into the market. But a part of the market that they didn't have was intelligent buildings. But the Japanese didn't want us to sell ourselves into the market. Basically, we did a study with them. The Japanese said the only way you're going to sell intelligent buildings in Japan is if you sell through the contractors and the architects. They're the ones that option your equipment in the market. So unless your partners are distributors that are architects or big, big building firms, you're not going to sell anything. We tried and we didn't. Only when we took on partners that were architects or distributors that were big contracting firms could we sell our stuff. So we sold behind somebody, okay? And last but not least, we were in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. We were trying to win a very big military contract. If you know anything about the UAE, there are a couple people in the royal family that control the place. One of them is Sheikh Khalifa, one of those is Sheikh Mohammed. Khalifa is also interested in the military. He resides in Abu Dhabi, which is where all the money is. Mohammed is in Dubai, where all the building is. And the third guy is a guy by the name of Sheikh Nahyan. He's in charge of education. He's the guy that I know. His 2 sons have been to my program. But when I was selling there, we wanted to sell this big military fiber optic. It was called Milcom. And it was $500 million in one sale. It would be $1 billion by the time we got done. But the end of the story was, while we had the best price and we were the only one of the bidders that was making our own fiber optics, So we could control that product the best of anybody. They said unless you did a partnership, and some of you may know this name of this company because it's one of the biggest telecom companies in the Middle East, it's a Salat. The chairman of that company was a guy by the name of Weiss. Unless we did a venture with him, they wouldn't sign the contract with us. And that came directly from Khalifa. So we had to sign a joint venture. They had to become our services company. They did all the digging. They did all the construction. We normally do all that. You make a lot of money doing that by digging all the trenches, putting up the poles, building the buildings. But they wouldn't let us do that. We had to sign that business to those guys. They became our partner. So the bid went in with them as our partner. When the bid went in, we beat out again the Germans and the French and the Canadians were bidding for that bid. The only way we could win it was to have a local partner. Okay? So that's kind of the way that you have to go about doing business. So let me just spend a second here. Dario asked me to mention something on the desk here. On the desk I have some brochures of the program. Several of the members of your classmates have been to our Global Village program. Gordana was just there. Dario was one of my management team. Tanya was there. Yvonne, Laura. We run this program in the States in the summer, and it's for international young people. There are engineers there are business people, there are lawyers. We've even had doctors. We bring them from all over the world together to study how to do business together, to study leadership, working together, trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, and mainly to connect them with people from all over the world. What makes it different, much like your managers of this program are trying to do, we try to make it very, very different. It's very intensive. You have courses, short courses, 3 hours, mostly in length, but you also have panels of business people, venture capitalists. You have panels of successful global businessmen. You have family businessmen. You have about 70 executives that you'll meet from all over the world. We bring them in. You choose who you want to talk to, and you go away with them. We have country presentations. All the countries present about how to do business in their country. We take trips to New York and to Wall Street, to the United Nations, to the World Bank, because we believe you should be exposed to all those organizations. This is what last year's program looked like. So you can see we had 107 people there from 52 countries. This is the 17th year, so we're going into our 18th year. We've trained about 1,600 people now in about 131 countries. So that's your vision. I think that's where you're going, right? You're going to keep increasing the countries here, and this is a 5-week program. You'll see that we had actually more women than men in the program. The guys, I said like that when the program started, they were all guys. There were 80% men. But now, kind of around the world, the men and women are balancing out. So it's a very interesting dialogue about how you do business together. These are the countries. So those are the countries that have been to the program. Hopefully you see your country there. If you haven't, I'm particularly interested in coming. We have scholarships to help people come to them. Not full scholarships, but at least a few $1,000s to give you to come to the program. It's 5 weeks in the United States. I'm sure if you talk to some of your classmates, they can talk to you about it. We'll have another over 100 people here next summer. And I'm sure we'll have at least 50 countries. This program is supported by governments, by universities. You can see some of the yeah, we have the governments support it. The U.S. State Department picks people from the Eastern European countries. We have about 10 Muslim countries that come to the program. And we'd love to have you be part of it. So I've got some brochures up here, and I've got my cards up here. If you're at all interested some year in trying to get together with people from other technologies and other business people where everybody works on teams together. We do a lot of presenting together over 5 weeks. I promise you it would be an experience of a lifetime, especially with so many technical people here. Would give you the business side of it, which I think is important for you to understand. Okay? That's about it. Do you have any questions about anything I said? I covered a lot of territory, okay? A whole bunch of territory in the whole world, right? Go ahead. Sebastian.
Little question, based on your experience,
Yeah.
one of the issues of joint venture is not only to set up a venture, but to give it sustainability.
Right.
So often when you have a joint venture, you have two partners with complementary skills, so different skills. And they will learn from each other. So for instance, you will find a partner to enter into market, and
And
with
blow
the
up.
time you will get knowledge on the market.
Right.
On the other side, the other partner would like to learn from your technology, and you will get this knowledge. So what would be your, let's say, general recommendations to maintain or to enable to protect the venture and through the time?
Yeah. Okay, so Sebastian is saying, what do you do for the long term? Because it's not good enough just to enter the market and have it blow up, right? So we're trying to, well, okay, first off, we're trying to pick partners that actually have a presence in the market that we can believe in, right? Either they have the right government or the right regional connections that we know that they can deliver the market over a long period of time, okay? Two, we're usually interested in partners that have a leg up on the technology in the country. They're already technologists. As an example, when we went into China, they made us partner. We actually selected a partner that was the Technology Association. There were two then. They were called MMEI and PTIC. And we picked one of them because they were the best in technology. Okay. Number three, and this happened in Japan, it happened in China, and several other places. Our partners expected us to train their people for the long term, not just in the country. So like in China, we had a program called the SMDP, the Senior Management Development Program. We picked key managers, not only in the venture, but in the government, and we sent them back for their master's degree in the United States. Okay? This was a long-term play, because if I send a government guy that's not in telecom, but I'm hoping that he seeds into the government, okay? In Japan, they wanted us to have 2-year assignments where we train people at Bell Laboratories. So we had to have a long-term training program laid out for the Japanese before they would do a job with us, right? So people that had the market, people that were in the technology, and people that were willing to have a long-term view of training so that we had kind of reciprocal. The other side of this is that within 5 years, there are never any Americans left in these ventures, okay? Within 5 years, we've turned over the managing director. All the senior team is pretty much locals, and we're out of there, right? So they were very, very concerned. Our best partners were the ones that really worked to put the best people in the venture so that we could walk away, not completely, because we still own part of the venture, right? And that was the profile. Okay, good, all right. Okay, well, it's been a long afternoon. Hopefully you guys got a different view, huh? Business? Some of you want to go into business, right? You're all technologists, you're all going to work in business, right? Some of you, unless you're a professor. Yeah, go ahead.
You want a question?
Yeah.
You see, you told us that democracy is important key.
Yes,
And
in some countries, yeah.
And I see Libya on your.
Yeah, well, there's no democracy there, right?
And you
Well-
talk about Dubai or something like
Well, okay.
that.
No, okay. Okay, very interesting question. Okay, now he's asking a political question. Yeah, it's a good question. I just looked this up because I was talking about democracy in the world, okay? And if you look it up, 200 countries in the world, how many of them do you think have true democracy?
Depends on the definition of
It depends on your definition, right, it does. Because there's the graduations, but let's just say it's something less than about 50. 50 countries out of 200 would have true democracy, open elections, free press, that kind of thing, right? So 2/3 of the world does not run on democracy, right? They can be theocracies, they can be one person in charge, they can be presidents that never leave, they can be dictators, they can be a lot of things, right? So the idea of the U.S. government, the reason they support all these Eastern European countries, and they pay for them to come to my program, and all these Middle Eastern countries, is they're trying to pick young people who they believe are going to stay in their country and they're going to go up in business and go up in government. And they're trying to bring them to the United States, teach them what democracy means in a free, open business environment, hoping that when they go back, they're going to transfer some of that, right? I mean, part of what's going on in the Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia, and you know, spread all over, and you know what's going on in Egypt right now, and I don't want to comment on Syria because that's another case, but part of that was a lot of people who were trying to get rid of old-time dictators and get something like democracy, at least some kind of democratic process in the country, right? But democracy only exists in 1/4 of the whole world. Good question. Okay? Enough? Well, hopefully you learned something today, something different anyway, okay? Thank you very much for your time, okay? If you're interested, if you want to contact me, my cards are up here and there's some brochures, so